Work here. Welcome back to the bench. Today we're going to cover a little bit of a rarity in my collection. That is the CZ SP-01 Phantom. So slide overview. The SP-01 Phantom is a polymer version of CZ's classic SP-01. So it's a lightened version to make it more easy to carry. A couple of the features are obviously the polymer frame, the decocker, and the light and slide. Now, as with the SP-01, the Phantom also comes with two 18-round magazines, giving this thing an 18+1 capacity. Now, while I'm going over this, I'm going to be breaking this down to clean it. So what we'll do is, as I'm breaking it down, we'll go over some of the features. Then when I get it back together, I'll tell you some of the things I like, and I'll tell you some of the things that I don't like. As with all CZs, pull the barrel back, line up the marks, push the pin, and off the slide comes. Now, again, as with most CZs, this design is an inverted slide rail, so the slide actually rides inside the frame. But, unlike other CZs with metal frames, this has an internal frame substructure, making the sport a little bit different for the way the slide rides through the frame. Breaking down the slide, you can see that they have undercut the slide a little bit here and here to reduce the overall weight. The guide spring is still the standard guide spring found in the SP-01, and the barrel is, of course, CZ's cold hammer forged barrel. The SP-01 and the SP-01 Phantom, because they are 75 variants, have the lug locking style rather than the block locking style. What this does is this makes the barrel action a lot straighter when it unlocks to eject around. As I'm cleaning this up, I do want to point out CZ has always done an impeccable job of polishing the feed ramp. This thing is bone stock and there is not a machine mark on here. So internally, the slide is just a standard SP-01, which is basically just a standard 75 slide. Externally, it does differ a little bit. I really like these needle oilers when I'm working on my guns. Lets you get exactly the right amount of oil, exactly in the right place. I'll toss a link in the description below for both an Amazon site and for a really cheap Chinese source. The cheap Chinese ones are good, but they take forever to get here. On the standard SP-01, the slide slides inside the frame. It does the same thing on the Phantom. However, on the SP-01, you get full-length rails on here because the entire frame is what that slide is riding in. On the Phantom, however, you get a simple two-set back here, more similar to a Glock or an M&P, where it's got this subframe back here. And I think this has something to do with something that I'll talk about here in just a little bit when we get around to actually reviewing this thing. Okay, she's all cleaned up, so let's get on with talking about it a little bit. So, like all CZs, this thing fits in your hand. It just fits. The ergonomics of CZs are amazing. I don't know how they've produced a gun that fits better in the hand than 99% of other firearms, but they do, and they do it consistently. Every CZ that I've picked up just fits. Now, the Phantom does come with removable back straps. I believe it comes with 2 of them, so you can fine-tune it even more. Now, along the line there as well, it does have relatively good stippling here. CZ's polymer guns do a really good job of adding a stipple on here that isn't overly aggressive, but it keeps the gun in your hand. The stippling on the side is akin somewhat to sandpaper. It's really loose. It's not quite as grippy as aftermarket stippling, but it's way grippier than the stippling on the front and the back of it. Now the stippling on the front and the back, you can see is directional stippling. This stippling is specifically created to keep the firearm in your hand, to keep it from shifting, and it works really well. Now, another thing that is great about this thing is the accuracy. This thing is an SP-01, so you get all of that SP-01 accuracy out of it. Now, obviously, another upside are the rather large magazines. 18+1 rounds is a lot of ammo to have in a handgun. And because it's a 75 variant, CZ75 magazines work too. The very last thing that I want to talk about as far as pros on this thing is reliability. This gun is reliable. This has never had a failure to feed. It's never had a failure to extract. It's had a couple failure to fires, but the reason it had them was because I was trying out someone else's ammo when they were having a problem with it. They were getting failure to fires in their firearm as well, so we tossed them in the Phantom to see if it was the ammo or the gun. It ended up being the ammo, but every single one of them went off with the second pull of the trigger. That's another great thing that I love about CZs. And hammer-fired guns. Hammer-fired guns give you that ability to double strike a round. Your automatic reaction doesn't have to be a tap rack to get that round out. In the heat of battle, even the best trained people don't always stick to their training. They may pull the trigger and keep pulling and pulling. And if you get a failure to fire in this, that second pull isn't just going to be a dead pull. It's going to strike the primer, and there's a good chance that that's going to get that round to go off. Now, one thing about hammer-fired guns that I really like is the ability to have a decocker. The decocker allows the hammer to drop, and without the danger of accidentally dropping the hammer and firing the round. What that does is that gives you a nice double-action trigger pull as a safety without actually having a safety on the firearm. Speaking of the trigger in the Phantom is a standard CZ75 trigger. So you can see here it is at half cock, and the trigger has about 3/8 of an inch of take-up, and on that take-up you then start pulling through the double action and into the fire. Now upon firing, the weapon cycles, hammer stays back. We are now in a single action mode, and you can see the take-up on this trigger. It's about halfway through the pull. A little bit of slack, and then a simple single action break. Now, although I like the standard 75 trigger okay, I much prefer the Omega triggers that they have in the newer products. They're simpler, they're more crisp to me, and they're easier to make even better. Now let's go into some of the things that I dislike about the Phantom, because believe it or not, there are some things about this CZ I don't like. First, and I think the majority of this is attributed to what this gun is, this CZ doesn't handle recoil that well. Its recoil impulse is worse than the Glock 17.
Naturally aims.
Now, you may not think that's a big deal unless you've shot steel frame CZs before. Now, I think the reason is that they kind of went too far on this. What they did was they took a metal design CZ and just replaced it with plastic. Obviously, there was more engineering that went into it from there, but the whole concept behind this was to get an SP-01 that was lighter weight. So what they do, they remove the weight. They remove the weight from the frame by creating it out of polymer. But the polymer frame meant we no longer had full-length guide rails. And the loss of those full-length guide rails put all of the recoil force back here rather than spreading it out along the entire frame. Now, we also reduced the slide weight. Now, reducing the slide weight put more of that reaction down into the frame of the gun rather than absorbing it up here. And all of these things drive back to an increased recoil. So to harken back to my CZ myth video right here, it is not all about weight reduction. There is a lot of design that goes into these things to make them fire as well as they fire. And I think the Phantom, because it wasn't from scratch designed to be a polymer frame firearm, misses some of those design aspects. My P-07 actually recoils better than this Phantom does. So about my only other complaint about this firearm is something that I think gets complained about a lot on all stock guns, and that is the sights. The sights on the Phantom, they're just a standard 3-dot sight. The dots are horribly tiny, they're difficult to see, and they're a little too close to GI sights for me. The very last thing about the Phantom that you should probably know if you're looking at buying one is standard SP-01 accessories, like holsters, don't always necessarily fit. Now, they won't necessarily not fit, but you need to check on it before you purchase it. Because they took a standard model and modified it to have a polymer frame, the polymer frame is slightly larger than the SP-01's frame. What that does is on some tight-fitting holsters, that makes it so that the Phantom won't fit in an SP-01 holster. Again, this isn't so much of a problem as long as you know about it beforehand. So, just a heads up, if you pick one of these up and you're looking for a holster, make sure that you pay attention to that. So overall, I really like the SP-01 Phantom. It's a really unique gun, there aren't a whole lot of them around, and I really commend CZ in what they were trying to do here. But I think they pulled it off better with the P-07 and the P-09 line. Those firearms, because they were designed from scratch to be polymer frame firearms, just end up working slightly better. Would I recommend the Phantom? Absolutely. As with any CZ, this thing is awesome. However, for me, I think I prefer the standard SP-01. So that's it for this time, guys. Just a review of the CZ SP-01 Phantom. Remember, if you found this video useful, please like and subscribe down below. Go ahead and list what your thoughts on this firearm are below, and let me know if you've got any questions or if you're looking at anything similar. Again, keep an eye out for more reviews and upcoming videos, and until next time, do your research, get informed, and get to work.